Hey, I'm Luke Ford, and I'm here with the blogger JewAmong You, and it's just a great title for a blog. How did you decide to start blogging, and how did you choose that name?
Well, I'll start with the first question. I decided to start a conference in Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't know how well you know the history of that, but what happened was we were intimidated in the hotel staff and management of our venues. I say venues plural because it was for several days we didn't know if we'd find a place where we could actually have the conference. It was off and on. Nobody knew what was going to happen. It was the first conference that was to take place outside of Washington, D.C. or actually Virginia. And of course, like most other attendees, I had purchased my air tickets well in advance and was excited and all hyped up. And the week leading up to that was just, okay, this venue had to canceled because they had death threats, and the next venue canceled because of death threats, and the next venue. Next thing you know, we didn't have there was no hotel in all of Charlotte that would allow us to have our conference there. And I decided, well, I already have my tickets. I'm going. I'm not going to get a partial refund on the tickets. I already have my vacation planned out. And I wasn't the only one who thought that. So a bunch of us got together and we had what's called the Shadow Conference, which we ended up having actually, we did find a hotel for that because it was not done under the name American Renaissance or any other pseudonym that it might be known as. So they didn't realize the same thing, basically. Actually, it wasn't the same thing, but it was pretty close. But it turned out what had happened is that one of the councilmen in Charlotte, by the name of Cannon, I can't remember his first name, had actively intimidated the hotel management to not allow us to hold our conferences there. So this is an agent of the government infringing on our First Amendment rights, blatantly. And that made a lot of us very angry. It made me very angry because I wanted to hear what other people had to say, and I had things I wanted to say. And from that moment on, I decided, well, since if they're going to be that way, I'm going to be all the more outspoken. And I already had one or two articles I'd written previously, so I decided just to start my own blog. And I started with Reflections of a Racist Father, which looks at the issue of interracial marriage, specifically white-black interracial marriage from a Jewish perspective. I had already written that, and that's what I started my blog with. The fact that I commented on American Renaissance and linked back to that blog initially helped build my traffic somewhat. Why did I call it JewAmong You?
Yeah.
There wasn't really any compelling reason I had to call it that. There are a lot of other names I could just as easily have chosen, but there weren't that many Jews commenting on American Renaissance website at the time, a handful. And I just wanted to add, make it more visible that there are Jews who sympathize with the plight of whites in general, considering what a bad reputation we have. I think it would be a positive thing. So I just went with that name. It was just a spur of the moment name, and that stuck.
Yeah,
and
so what year did you begin blogging?
Well, it was 2011.
Okay.
Right as soon as I got home from the conference, I started the blog. Some people in the more anti-Semitic fringes of the alt-right movement have accused me of using the name JewAmong You as if to insinuate that I'm give a negative connotation of among you as if I'm some kind of a mole, that I'm there to spy, and obviously that's not my intention. I'm very much sympathetic with it and on board with civil rights for whites, just like everybody else.
Yeah. And how many American Renaissance conferences have you been to?
Oh gosh, I think it's been about 5 or 6. I missed 1 or 2. One because I had just gotten back from a month-long vacation in Ethiopia, so that was expensive, and it was quite an adventure. And right after that, I found out my daughter was getting married, so I had to attend that, and that kind of pushed me at the limits as far as budget and travel fatigue, etc. And at that point, that year I didn't go. That was the year before last. But I try to go every year as much as possible. Not that I'm going to hear anything there that I can't hear otherwise, but it's a chance to get together with like-minded people and to be in an island of sanity and a sea of insanity.
And how are you received at American Renaissance conferences?
For the most part, positively. It's not like, for most people, it's not a positive or negative. It's just neutral. I'm there like everybody else, and it's not really an issue that I have a blog. And a lot of people sometimes, well, some people do come up and say, hey, I read your blog. I really admire some of the things you say, and that you have the courage to be outspoken. And there are, of course, a few who are the opposite. It does attract people who hate Jews, no matter who they are, regardless of whether they're sympathetic with the white cause or not. They just hate Jews. And sometimes in the past, that's been they've made that known one way or another. Although I've never felt physically threatened there, and the vast majority of people there, at least in the more recent conferences, don't feel that way. I have been in the same room with Don Black and one of the earlier conferences and his crowd from Stormfront. No words were exchanged between us. He wouldn't even look at me, and that's fine. They kept to themselves. They didn't bother me for the most part.
How did they make it known that how did the Jew haters make their Jew hatred known to you, to the extent that they did?
There was one incident where there was it was actually, I think it was at the banquet. At the end of the banquet, there was one individual sitting at a table and by himself. So I decided I'd sit up next to him and socialize. And he was clearly drunk. So he started just rambling on about, I don't know if I'm allowed to use racial epithets on this.
Yeah, use whatever you want.
Yeah, niggers and kikes, and I guess he didn't realize I was a kike, but I didn't appreciate that kind of language either way. Especially since he was obviously referring to all blacks and he was referring to all Jews, and there do happen to be some black people who sympathize with our cause too. So I just don't appreciate that kind of blanket hatred, and I don't think that's what American Renaissance is about or should be about. So anyway, I reported him to Jared, and said, that guy's drunk. He's trouble. We don't need that kind of reputation here, and I think they got rid of him. There were one or two other incidents, that I can't really talk about because it might reflect badly on people who shouldn't reflect badly. That's kind of a sensitive thing. But I've been accused of being like I said, of being a mole, trying to spy on people and trying to record conversations, things like that, which is not really possible anyway. Even if I wanted to, and nor to prove anything, because conversations are innocuous. People come there, they talk about their lives. For the most part, they're not there to plot the overthrow of the government. The conversations after there are not anything by the furthest stretch of the imagination, not illegal. They're not hateful. They're not anything that anybody would have any reason to hide. So it's just a ridiculous accusation.
What feedback do you get from people, particularly Jews, for even attending American Renaissance conferences?
The Jews I know in my personal life, for the most part, they're not really aware that I attend. Some of my family members know. My kids know. Some of them. Parents don't really know. But if it did come out, then they would still love me, and I would still love them.
And your video is frozen, so I hope we'll get you back any minute now. But I'm talking from Reuben from the blog at JewAmongYou, and your video stream is frozen, Reuben. If you just Google JewAmongYou, you'll find Reuben's blog. And I've been reading it for a couple of years. He's a race realist Jew, a libertarian, a great believer in civility, and someone who's traveled widely in Africa, in Mexico, and got quite a thoughtful take on America and the world and issues of race and diversity. And you're still absolutely frozen, Reuben. I don't know what to say. Hope you can come back in soon. But he's dropped out of the chat room, and I think he'll be coming back. And we'll keep the show rolling. So JewAmongYou is the blog, and Reuben's link from Steve Saylor, which I think is pretty cool. Steve Saylor's like the kind of the godfather of the alt-right, and so his computer overheated. He's rebooting it now. So well, hang on, and I'm just going to adjust my camera and my lighting. Steve Saylor has been blogging since I think about 2001. So very influential man. Dennis Dale, I know from the Steve Saylor blog. JewAmongYou, I know from the Steve Saylor blog. And Steve Saylor links to about 100 different blogs that are often on the realm of race realism or the alt-right. And we're going to get JewAmongYou back anytime. He's in Portland, as was the bloke that I interviewed earlier today, Dennis Dale. And I know that Kevin McDonald moved to Portland. So Portland and Oregon in general, of course, are quite a white state. It was deliberately started as a white-topia. That was kind of the theory behind Portland, is that behind Oregon was that it'd be a state that was for explicitly white people, and it's always had a very high percentage of whites, though that seems to be dropping every year now. And even though Portland's left wing, it's got this high proportion of whites, but it is steadily, bringing in more refugees, more Mexicans, and having some of the problems that come with racial diversity. I'm absolutely in love with Portland. I visited it a couple of times. In 2001, I was driving up from Los Angeles all the way to Vancouver, and I spent a Shabbat in Portland on the way up, and then a Shabbat in Portland on the way back. There's a lovely little Orthodox Jewish community there, along with plenty of non-Orthodox synagogues. But I just love Portland. It was just so clean. There's so little dysfunction. And Reuben, you're back. So I was just carrying the show down.
I'm back.
Oh my God, what was that sound?
Earlier?
Wait, some terrible sound.
Yeah, right now or earlier?
Okay, it's gone. Oh no, it's still there.
Really?
It sounds like an ice machine going on. What's that horrible sound?
It could be off.
I'm sorry?
It's white noise I use. It's beautiful because I have a limited noise.
Yeah, I can't hear you. I'm gonna stop the broadcast and we'll come back.